Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today it is the season to be tiny whooping, and what a coincidence that there is a new tiny whoop flight controller out. This is the Beecore V2 and it's going to add a on-screen display to your tiny whoop. It has got everything built in, so here is the board. So it comes available with FreeSky D8 or FlySky 2A protocol. That's important because that's the one that has the correct failsafe, and the DSM to DSM-X protocol. It costs just a couple of pounds more than the first version, so what are you waiting for? Well, today I'm going to be checking this out. So as I say, it's got Betaflight on-screen display built into it. This one has come flash with Betaflight version 3.2. And it has got the target as Omnibus F3, so it's an F3 flight controller. Hopefully very easy to set up. We just have our motor inputs here, and then this is where our camera is now going to connect. We've got the 5-volt there, and then the ground, and then the video out and the video in. Now, the problem with having this system is the majority of these tiny whoop cameras do not have their video in and video out split, and what you usually have to do is cut into these standoffs here and figure out which is the video in and video out, etc. I'm not going to do that. So in today's video, when I'm going to be testing this out, I'm going to be using this camera, which is the HC48D. So this does have its video in and out split, so I'm going to be able to just cut these wires off and solder it direct to the board here. As for the model I'm going to be using, yes, it's going to be the Eachine E010S, I think it was called. My actual tiny whoop frame is absolutely destroyed because I have ruined it over the years, but you can see here that this one actually holds a different size battery, but it does hold these tiny whoop style batteries, and this is a 230 milliamp high volt using a MCPX style connector, which is important because they've given you all of the connector options with this board. So we've got micro LOSI here, then we've got MCPX, and we've also got the original 1.25 pitch JST for the original tiny whoop. So all the things that you need, and then we've got some mounting options here as well. And you're probably thinking, how am I going to fit this camera? I've actually found a 3D printed mount on Thingiverse for this particular camera, so I'll link it in the below. This camera, it's okay, it's not brilliant. It's the one that was on the V-tail, so the Eachine V-tail. So yeah, it's not great with dynamic range, but it's extremely light, and it has this sleeve dipole antenna, so it should be good for whooping about the place. And yeah, I really liked this model when it came out. It's got the Racer Star red motors there, slightly bigger ducts, and I think the props might be a little bit bigger on this one as well, so should have some decent power. So I'm going to be using my Taranis to bind to it, and you're probably wondering how I'm going to charge these batteries. I use the EV Peak charger. It does all sorts: JST, Micro, LOSI, MCPX, and MCX, aka JST 1.25 pitch, and it does high volt. So yeah, I'll link that in the below. And then for FPV, I'm going to be using my Fat Shark Dominator HD3 goggles, along with the Omway Cloverleaf antenna, the Bandicoot patch linear antenna, very important for these cameras with linear antennas, and then this is the real ACC Pro Plus diversity module. And like I say, I'll link all of this in the below for a complete ultimate tiny whoop setup. Okay, so here is the finished piece. There's just a couple of things I have had to change to get this to fit in this frame. The first one is I've actually had to put the board in backwards. That is because on this Eachine board here, the USB connector gets in the way of this stand here, so very easy fix. Just flip it around and then set the board alignment to 180 degrees, and that sorts that problem out. I can just about reach the USB connector in here, but really it's designed for a tiny whoop frame, but I've destroyed my frame. So one thing to be careful of as well is when you're soldering in the camera, it's very close to this chip here and these components, so you have to be very careful not to get the solder over them. So for this one, the video in is on this orange wire, and then the video out on this purple wire, and then we've got the ground and then the 5 volt, very easy with this camera. And I have had to reprint the mount just because there's actually some components underneath here, and this has to flex over the top of the components, and it actually cracked using PLA, so I've switched that out to TPU, and that fits nicely now. And I've got the little foam mounts underneath here as well. The thing weighs just 20 grams, which is amazing, and if you're wondering how I get the battery in, it still slots in here, which of course means that I have to have the connector at the front because it's not quite long enough to reach the back with it being mounted in the reverse orientation. But apart from that, it's been pretty easy, and this I think is going to be my favorite indoor setup, I have a feeling, because it's just so lightweight and it's got great power. Just a couple of things to note in Betaflight. I had motor stop turned on, so I switched that off. I set my rate to 0.8, which is just my preference. It's got these stock PIDs, which I have left in place for now. It had everything turned on for the on-screen display, so I've changed that to my liking. Actually, the receiver has RSSI on the aux 5, which was already set up, so make sure if you've got the FreeSky version at least have your RSSI on there. I can't comment for the FlySky and DSMX versions, but the FreeSky version has got the RSSI on there. A little bit of a gimmick with something like this, but there you go. I guess the only thing that we don't have with this is a buzzer, but it's a tiny whoop, so it'd make it a little bit too heavy with a buzzer, I think. Of course, you can use the command set small underscore angle equals 180, and then if you get stuck upside down or if you flew outdoors, then you could arm the motors quickly and you'd probably hear them going. But yeah, no option for a buzzer on here. There is a little boot pad. It's not on a button though, so if you brick it, you're going to have to solder the boot pad. And of course, there's no turtle mode because it's using brushed motor, so there's no D-shot there. But I don't like turtle mode anyways because I don't like my motors running when the props are potentially caught in something. It can burn stuff out. So yeah, I'm just going to be flying this one indoors, and let's go and see how it performs. So I think this is by far my favorite indoor model now, and let me tell you why. Actually, no, let me show you why, because the Tiny Whoop class turns your house into an obstacle course. You can get into tiny spaces that you wouldn't even think of doing if you had a model that was just a tiny bit bigger than this. And I know many would argue you can get a brushless model in those spaces. Yeah, you probably can. However, because they are a lot more powerful, you tend to find that when you get in these really tight spaces, the prop wash upsets the copter and you bash into things. Now, don't get me wrong, that happens a little bit with a Tiny Whoop, but it's manageable. And as you can see, I'm able to get in these really tight spaces. Now, I got a comment on the channel a little while ago that said you don't have the skills to showcase these indoor models, and that's fair enough. You know, go and make your own video, maybe watch a different video. Usually people who say comments like that don't have a video to their name, but I kind of get what they are saying. I think it's because I don't fly acro indoors, and you're not a professional unless you can fly acro indoors. Well, look, I'm having a lot of fun flying this in angle mode. I always fly in angle mode indoors. I just find that there's less drift when you're in angle mode, and if you can do acro indoors, fantastic. But I'll say that this is a lot of fun for me. I'm loving getting in these really tiny spaces. I mean, they really are small spaces, and yeah, now that I have the on-screen display on there as well, which is working great. By the way, this is my favourite indoor model, I think. Yeah, it doesn't have the power of a brushless model, and people tell me that their brush motors burn out. I've never had a brush motor burn out on me. Usually the FETs burn out on the flight controller before a motor, but it's very rare that I've had that as well. So the camera I was actually surprised at, because the camera, when it was on a brushless model, so yeah, I think this camera was used on some of the Aurora series, it didn't work so well outdoors, but I think it's working nicely here. A little bit blurred, but I can see where I'm going nicely. And yeah, this combination just works really well. And something I wasn't able to test in this flight was the range, but that was because the house is full of people and they didn't want to be on camera. But I did do a flight. Sadly, I wasn't recording with the DVR, and I managed to fly all around the house without any breakup, and the RSSI never dropped below 60, which is amazing. So that's another reason why this is now my favorite model, because the range and video reception is fantastic with it as well. And the flight time, I was getting a 4-minute flight time staying in one room and a 3-minute flight time darting around the house, which is very acceptable compared to my original Tiny, which got like, I don't know, a 2-minute flight time. One thing I will say though with these high C batteries is that the voltage drops off very quickly. Just watch this, 3 volts, and then all of a sudden I've got no power. But there you go, that is my Beecore V2 review and my winter Tiny Whoop setup. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.